Welcome. And here we are at number 5 in the current series of reflections under the title Freedom. Freedom? Question. Number 5 in the series, so we are midway. And it's a good moment to pause and look again at really what it is we're aiming to do when we come together for these reflections. We're certainly not gathering information. These are not lectures. We have all the information we need, probably. It may be that during these orientations, these beginning impulses for each reflection, you may hear some facts that you had missed before, but that's not important. We're here simply to stand back from the pressures of everyday life and to look again and see perhaps a little differently, from a new perspective, with a deeper insight into the reality or the meaning of something that we thought we were very familiar with. It's a little like this. You see, it's old technology. You all know what this is. It's the egg timer. The sand is at the bottom. You turn it upside down. The sand runs from top to bottom, and it times 3 or 4 minutes. Of course, you could have it the other way round. An egg timer where you have to turn it upside down, and this time the sand goes from bottom to top. It does the same amount of timing as the other one. It's just one goes from top to bottom and this one goes from bottom to top. A new perspective. This is really what we're doing in the series. And it may mean that you will look at the same issue, ask yourself the same questions several times, the second, third, or fourth time during the series. It doesn't matter. You're not information gathering. We're looking deeply into the meaning, the purpose of any issue that we raise together. Finding what we missed the first time we looked and listened. Okay, so we need to get away from the media, the abundant media facts and information that are given. Sometimes the information is skewed, it's seriously biased, it was never the truth to begin with. So we get right back to the simple issues that we are facing. As we walk through this life's journey that we all make from conception to death, our human society is going through different experiences, and each era has certain characteristics that the previous ones did not have. We've looked at some of these this time in the series. You just remind you. In the first one, we looked at the fact that this is an age where we are in cosmic proportions. And the challenge of this age is to look in our ordinary everyday life situation, to look at the barriers, the obstacles, and to widen them out into new horizons. The second one, we looked at this age as an age of immense achievement, success in projects, in every field of human endeavour, where we're gaining more and more that we can say is mine. And so the challenge is to learn once again that life has to be a life of dispossession, where I'm slowly learning that I really do not own anything. And for this we have to learn to take the glue off our fingers so that we don't get stuck to anything and consider it so important that we can't let it go. In number 3, we looked at ourselves as walking through an age of digital communication. The speed, the distances, the different methodologies. And we looked at the question of whether any of this was helping us to communicate with each other, or simply just to message information shot back across the globe at high speeds. The challenge was to learn how to listen, how to learn to listen to the silence, especially as now we know that on planet Earth we never really experience silence. We've discovered that since we went out into space. So we're having to learn how to listen to the silence beyond the noise, the messaging, the communication skills of our minds. And then we came to number 4, which surprised many of us because we realized we're also living in an age of fear. With all our achievement, our success, we are becoming more and more fearful. And we looked at some of the signs at the level of fear, the increase in violence and confusion. And we asked ourselves, what are we really afraid of? And we discovered we're afraid of ourselves, or rather our personhoods. The fact that we are one human species, we are one family, and yet this family is vastly diverse, frighteningly so. And so, what is helping us to live through the fear of the vast diversity of human beings? And we came up with a word that is very familiar, faith. But we looked at this very carefully to discover perhaps we're using that word faith to mean something else. Tradition, for example, religious teaching. Whereas we need to experience faith in what we cannot see and cannot explain and cannot understand with the mind. And so that covered the first half of this particular series. And we ask ourselves, well, where do we start today? Now, as things should in life, it all seems to become more simple and therefore, in actual fact, more difficult. The reflection today is, well, on the fact that we are all well aware of the increasing sophistication of our technologies and our technical skill. Oh yes, we're looking at things like our advances in cosmology, space travel, questions of landing on the moon, going on Mars, going to the other side of the moon, which we hadn't really explored, and now sending robots onto the surface of the moon, not astronauts. Okay, but it's the sophistication of the technology used in space exploration. That's one thing. But it's not only that. It's in everyday life. Our ordinary technology is getting more and more sophisticated. Look at the work that is being done by robots in hospitals. Yes, we're used to the idea that the robots can go around delivering the pills to the patients, the tablets they have to take and when, even that the robot can say a kindly word or pat a hand of a patient who's anxious, or even comfort a small child. Robots in healthcare. Of course, it was amazing when we discovered that this had also been done a little while ago now. that the robot was in the operating theatre, performing a highly complicated and very delicate operation, while the surgeons were working behind a screen, giving instructions to the robots. Highly sophisticated technology. And what about robots in education? Yes, of course, the robots lining the children up and marching them from the classroom to the playground or the sports field, or taking one of them in to the nurse because he or she had fallen and needed the knee bandaged and so on. But robots as language teachers? Oh yes. Robots have become extremely successful in teaching English to Japanese students. It's at the beginning. How far has it already gone? I'm wearing a watch. Perhaps you are. I would have been a little ashamed of wearing this. It's so antique. But now I'm getting proud of it, you know. It's going to be in a museum soon. It's an ordinary watch. It just indicates the time. When I look at some of the watches that are advertised now, that are whole communication systems, taking photographs and almost making relationships and dates for me as well, watches, iPhones. Does all sophistication in technology have positive effects on our everyday life? Sometimes we're surprised at the negative outcomes of things that seem so simple. Think of the one where thousands and tens of thousands of passengers were stranded in an airport, one of the busiest airports in the world recently. Why? Because somebody with a small drone had sent the drone to fly over the airfield. You know, we may be thinking of these little drones that fly around with cameras taking photographs from the air. It's quite harmless things, unless they're being used by armies in war, which of course they are already. We've had several bits of information about this. But disrupting the flight schedule of a major world airport, and not just once, more than once. So, sophistication of our technologies in space, but also in the home, the hospital, the classroom, the sports field. One of the things we're all learning, slowly and painfully, is how over-reliant we are on the technology we use in everyday life. And it's always good to sit back and say, how seriously am I affected? Am I emotionally disturbed, for example, when a piece of my technical equipment isn't there, or doesn't work, doesn't function? I mean, how wild can you get when something goes wrong with the Skype or the email? Even in an ordinary home situation. Talk about professional life also. Have a look. What is the effect on me? And one of the effects is usually it robs me of the ability to evaluate the power and the importance of technology in my life. Its usefulness. It can rob me of the ability to choose to use or not. Okay, it's there, it does this marvellous thing or that marvellous thing. Can I say, wonderful, but I choose not to use it? That's one of the things that we have to look at this coming week. And I suggest you choose one piece of equipment that you have. It can be your computer, your cell phone, it can be something in the kitchen, something at the office where you work, it doesn't matter. And ask, could I function without this? Could I choose to say no? Could I find an alternative? That's another question. And this is a story now from a few years ago. It just shows how things creep up on us, perhaps without our noticing. A friend of mine was a history lecturer at university level, and she went into a class of students at one point, only to discover that they were all happily sitting there smiling, saying they couldn't finish the work they had been assigned to do because the computer system had gone down, and therefore they didn't have the information. And she just looked at them and said, "And the library?" And she could have been mentioning something from Mars. The library? No. Okay, we can laugh about it. And those of you who are old enough to realise it was a little while ago, a few years ago, but we were all in that situation. And it's getting worse. Can I choose to use? Can I find an alternative? Can I remember why I need this piece of sophisticated equipment? Now, most of us who are reflecting like this have lived our lives for a little while. Yeah? We're not beginning the life's journey now. But what about those who are beginning, who are walking for the first time through this world of highly sophisticated technological advantage? What can we learn from them? Well, I want to introduce you to two of them. Two of them I know, but you could put yourselves or your children or your grandchildren in their place. Here we have Harry and Max. Harry is just 5 years and 2 months, and brother Max is 2 years and 4 months. And they have gone on a visit with their parents to a friend's house, where they found themselves in a wonderland of percussion instruments. All sorts of things, to bang, to drum, to clatter, to turn switches, and see what happens. Well, I know Harry. He's a child of this era. At the age of 4.5, when he was moving from the kindergarten up to a proper school, he had first of all shocked his mother by saying, all right, he would go to school, but he wasn't going to read and write. He knew how to do that, so it was a waste of time. Now he wanted to get hold of things, you know. So when the principal asked him, and what do you want to do when you grow up? He said, I want to invent a robot that no one else has thought of. 4.5. Actually, he's wasting his time. By the time he gets old enough to have the equipment to do that, we will be into something entirely different. But this is Harry. And you may have your own children of Harry's age, or your grandchildren. They're growing up in this highly sophisticated technical world, in their ordinary, everyday life. Harry isn't, but he could be being taught English by a robot, which he might accept, as he doesn't think reading or writing is worthwhile. No. So they are in this world. Let me introduce you again to another small child that I know, and this is again a few years back. It doesn't matter if we go a few years back and the contemporary situation. This photograph of Harry and Max with the percussion instruments was only taken a few weeks ago. With the temperament that Harry certainly has, we can ask the question, what is he looking for? The physics of sound. What he can make happen. And why? And to what advantage? Basic questions. He's already started. Perhaps we have to re-ask ourselves some of those questions. But the second child I meant to mention was 4 years of age when he made a very wise contribution to our reflection. He was bounding home from the kindergarten one day, and it was his father's turn to collect him. Both mother and father had professional work, and they commuted from home every day, so they took it in turns which one could get away early enough to collect their son from the kindergarten. So let's call the father Tom and the boy Joe. So Joe bounded out of kindergarten, and his father had had a very difficult day at the office. And the last thing he wanted was the enthusiasm of his 4-year-old in the car. So he strapped him in, and he decided to put on some music. He slipped a disc into the player, you see it's a long time ago, and he started to play some music. Okay, his son didn't mind. But when they got to the house and he was unstrapping the belt to get him out, his son looked at him fully in the face and said, "Dad, where does the music live?" Now his father, off his bad day in work and just about recovering, answered, well, and he began on what he thought was a fairly simplified version of how you record a disc and the equipment there was in the car to produce the music. His son looked at him with total disbelief written all over his face. And then they went into the house for supper. Later that evening, his father was putting him to bed, and after the jokes and the stories, just as he was going to turn out the light, his son did what he did in the car. He turned round and looked him full in the face and said, "Daddy, where does the music live?" And this time his father got the answer right. He looked at him and said, "Inside you. The music lives inside you." Bright smile, the light went out, and the lesson had been learned. Now, it is a few years ago, because that little one who wanted to know where the music lived and was not happy with the explanation of how you record sound and how you can play it back in the car, the technology, has now finished his master's in physics and is heading for a doctorate. Okay. Now, these young children, what are they looking for? Certainly the physics, the technology of sound. Hopefully they are also looking for where the music lives, and they know the difference between the sound and the music. We can hear the sounds, but no other person hears the music that I hear. It's a totally unique, independent experience to each one of us. We may both say, "Oh, that's a wonderful piece of jazz," but actually what you're hearing and what I'm hearing, we cannot explain. There are no words for those sounds. There's no way we can communicate the experience by words. And yes, we have the physiology, We have eardrums and we know what happens when sound waves beat here and there, or we know what happens with our brains and so on. But that doesn't make the music. The music lives within us. Now, this is the world we're living in always. Even today's world, and how it will be 20 years from now, when Harry and Joe are looking at their children and their grandchildren, making their own exploration. We go through a world of sophisticated technology, and what we are discovering is the simplicity of the self, the simplicity of what is, which cannot be explained, which cannot be proved, which is way beyond mind, but is. The music that lives within us. So this month, one question to ask myself among all the others: am I really free to choose to listen to the music